The cast of the horror TV series, Shadow House, had traveled to a secluded Victorian house in Louisiana, rented through Airbnb, to shoot their new season. The actors included Alice, the young and ambitious lead, Bill, the horror veteran, and Mike, the brilliant but demanding director. Also in the cast was Rebecca, a shy girl who played the housemaid. In the plot of the series, every character was cursed and killed in horrific ways. But what started as a normal production soon turned into a nightmare. After the shooting was finished, the cast decided to stay in the house to celebrate. But that night, Bill was found dead, killed in the same way his character died in the series. Initially, the cast thought it was a tragic coincidence. However, when Mike was found dead the next day, also killed like his character in the series, the cast realized that something horrible was happening. Feeling trapped in the house, they tried to contact the outside world, but the signal was mysteriously gone. Slowly, each member of the cast was killed off, exactly as in the series. Alice, terrified, tried to find a way out, but all doors and windows were locked. The only one to escape death was Rebecca, the girl who played the maid, the only character who didn't die in the series. Rebecca was horrified and panicking, but she managed to escape through a secret trapdoor she had discovered during filming. Once in town, Rebecca immediately went to the police to report what had happened. But the police, although skeptical, conducted investigations. When they arrived at the house, they found it empty. There were no bodies, no signs of violence. It seemed as if Rebecca's story was just a product of her imagination. Back home, Rebecca tried to pick up her life, but she was marked by what she had experienced. Every night, she dreamt of her friends and colleagues, killed in horrific ways. And every day, she wondered what had really happened in the house. The story ends with a twist. Rebecca receives a notification from Airbnb. It's a request to review her stay at the Victorian house. The previous review says, "Great stay. Love the fact that the house follows the plot of the series so faithfully. It's as if the curses are real." With a chill of horror, Rebecca realizes that the house is indeed cursed and that her nightmare is not over yet. Georgia and Mattia, an Italian couple on vacation, had landed in Boston for the first time. They had booked a charming Victorian-style apartment in the historic Beacon Hill neighborhood through Airbnb, nestled among narrow cobblestone streets and red brick buildings. Their host, a man named Patrick, was a quiet writer and university professor who rented out his childhood home. Patrick had explained that the building was old and might make strange noises due to the pipes and creaking wood, but otherwise it was comfortable and quiet. On their first night, as they were falling asleep, Georgia and Mattia heard a noise of footsteps upstairs. It sounded like someone was pacing back and forth. Recalling Patrick's words, they didn't think too much of it. But the following morning, they found their stuff moved. The items they had left on the kitchen table were gone, and were found neatly arranged on the couch. They thought they might have forgotten them there, but a subtle sense of discomfort began to creep in. The noises continued throughout the week. One day, they heard a loud thump coming from the basement, as if something heavy had fallen. Mattia decided to check it out, but found nothing strange. The weird events kept happening. Whispered voices at night, doors opening by themselves, lights turning on and off with no apparent reason. They decided to contact Patrick, who seemed surprised, though. He told them there was no one else in the building, and that the sounds could be explained by the building's antiquity. But Georgia and Mattia were not convinced. One night, as they were lying in bed, they heard a dull noise coming from upstairs. Mattia got up to check, but when he opened the bedroom door, he found a message written on the entrance door with chalk. "This is not your home." Shocked, they called the police, who found no signs of intrusion. Patrick was contacted and revealed that the building had indeed been the site of a brutal murder in the 80s, but he had never had any issues with his rental. From that moment on, Georgia and Mattia lived in fear, but couldn't find another accommodation in a short time. They kept hearing the noises, but there were no further messages or signs of intrusion. On their last night, however, they saw a dark figure moving beyond their bedroom window, as if someone was watching them from outside. Then, it disappeared. On their departure day, they found another message on the door: "Come back soon." They left with goosebumps, happy to leave Boston. They didn't know if what they had experienced was caused by a spirit or a human, but they were sure of one thing: they would never forget that house. Allison and Mark, two teachers from Los Angeles, had booked a log cabin for a week in a quiet mountain town in Colorado through Airbnb. Their host, a lady named Diane, had described the home as the perfect retreat for nature and silence lovers. Upon arrival, they were greeted by the sight of the home, a cozy retreat nestled among the trees. The inside was furnished with rustic wood furniture and details that added a touch of homely warmth. They noticed, however, that one of the rooms, the third one, was locked. When they asked Diane, she explained that it was her son's room, who had disappeared years ago in a tragic accident. She preserved the room as it was in his memory. In the first few days, Allison and Mark enjoyed the serenity of the place. But when the snow began to fall, things changed. One night, they were awakened by a loud noise coming from the locked room. It was as if someone was scraping the floor with something metal. Worried, they called Diane, who reassured them that it was probably the wind blowing through the cracks of the old building. But the next morning, while they were making breakfast, they realized their phones were gone. Mark went to check their car, but it was snowed in. They were isolated. Tension rose when they began to find strange traces in the house: a missing kitchen knife, a disturbing drawing on the fogged-up window glass, a photo of them sleeping on the bedside table. That's when they realized they weren't alone. One night, while they were huddled on the couch, the door to the locked room creaked open. Out of it came a tall, thin man with an empty, obsessed gaze. Mark tried to fight, but the man was too strong. He tied him up and then did the same with Allison. The man introduced himself as Brian, Diane's missing son. He explained that Diane had chosen them as her next victims. Brian was, in fact, a serial killer, protected by his mother, who lured unsuspecting travelers into their trap. As he spoke, he showed an album full of photos of his previous victims, all people who had stayed in the house. Throughout the week, Mark and Allison were forced to live in constant terror, desperately looking for a way to escape. The tension came to a head when they managed to free themselves and fight against Brian. After a desperate struggle, Mark managed to overpower Brian and tie him up. Allison, though injured, managed to reach their car and free it from the snow. When the police arrived, they found Brian tied up and arrested him. Diane was arrested shortly after. Mark and Allison were saved, but they carried with them the weight of that terrifying experience. The quiet log cabin in the Colorado mountains, which they had chosen for a week of peace, had turned out to be a deadly trap. However, the story didn't end there. Years later, Allison received a letter with no return address. Inside, a single handwritten sentence: "Next time, you won't be so lucky." With a chill of terror, she realized that the nightmare was not over yet. Sophie and Ben, a young couple from Chicago, decided to spend their wedding anniversary in a historic Georgian villa, rented through Airbnb, in the countryside of New England. Their host, an elderly man named Edgar, had shared that the house had been in his family for generations, but had a tumultuous past. Arriving at the villa, they were struck by its majesty, from the grand columned porch to the elegant interior decor. Edgar had warmly welcomed them, but with a warning: this old house has quirks. It can make strange noises, and sometimes things move on their own. Pay it no mind. Sophie and Ben laughed, considering him an eccentric. The first day was serene and smooth, spent exploring the extensive surrounding park. But on the second night, trouble began. They woke up in the heart of the night, hearing dull thumps coming from downstairs. Going down to check, they found the dining room in disarray, with chairs overturned and the table flipped. They were frightened, but believed it was the result of a draft or an animal sneaking inside. They put everything back in place and returned to bed. But the next morning, they found their breakfast prepared on the table, with a cup of coffee still steaming. Now they were genuinely scared. They contacted Edgar, who seemed surprised but not worried. "It's just the house's quirks," he insisted. But Sophie and Ben were no longer so sure. The strange events intensified, doors opening and closing on their own, lights flashing without reason, footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. One night, they saw a dark shadow swiftly pass by their door. Another time, a mute scream echoed in the house, making the window glasses tremble. Everything came to a head when one night they were awakened by an icy cold. The ceiling above them seemed to vibrate with terrifying intensity, and then, suddenly, a loud crash made them jump. Running down, they saw the grand chandelier in the hallway had fallen, crashing to the ground. They were shocked and terrified, aware that something supernatural was happening. They decided to leave the villa the next day. But that night, as they were packing their bags, they heard a voice whisper in their ears, "Don't leave." It was then that they saw a dark shadow appear in the corridor, an antique-looking female figure, with an expression of sadness and anger. The story ends with a climax in which, thanks to a local medium, Sophie and Ben face the poltergeist, revealing a tragic story of love and betrayal dating back hundreds of years. In an act of compassion, they managed to free the spirit, returning peace to the old villa. However, as they depart, they hear a final whisper in the air, "Thank you." With a shiver, they realize that the house will forever be a place of history and mystery, a tangible memory of their encounter with the unknown. Emily and Jake were a successful and attractive couple from Los Angeles. Jake was a highly successful lawyer, while Emily was an established fashion designer. Their friend, Serena, had always been envious of the success and love that Emily and Jake shared. To celebrate their 5th anniversary, Emily and Jake decided to rent a luxurious 19th-century villa on Airbnb, situated in the wine hills of Northern California. Serena, hearing about their trip, felt a pang of jealousy. With a forced smile, she gave Emily a parting gift, an antique pendant she had bought at a flea market, claiming it brought good luck. Arriving at the villa, Emily and Jake were captivated by its beauty. The first day passed peacefully. However, the following night, Emily began to experience terrifying nightmares. She would wake up in a sweat, seeing a dark figure beneath the bed. Jake, trying to reassure her, insisted they were just dreams. But things got worse. Each night, Emily saw the dark figure, which seemed to be getting closer and closer. During the day, she began to feel weak and nauseous. Small accidents started happening around the house, glasses breaking on their own, doors slamming shut. Worried, Emily and Jake called a local priest, Father Thomas. They relayed everything that was happening, including Serena's gift. Father Thomas examined the pendant and appeared concerned. He said that the pendant was a talisman used in black magic rituals, often tied to envy and curse. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Father Thomas decided to perform an exorcism. The atmosphere charges with tension as the dark entity responds forcefully, causing poltergeists and frightening manifestations. But in the end, with the power of their faith and love, Emily and Jake manage to overcome the evil entity. With a final scream, the entity disappears, leaving the villa calm. Shaken but safe, Emily and Jake leave the villa. As they drive away, Emily looks at the pendant and decides to throw it away. Returning to Los Angeles, they decide to distance themselves from Serena, realizing that envy can sometimes become a dark and dangerous curse.